The bourbon glass in my hand had just reached that perfect condensation ring on the mahogany desk when the doorbell rang. 3 times, sharp and insistent. Not the polite chime of a neighbor or a delivery. No, this was Emily's way, always urgent, always dramatic, as if the world itself bent to her timetable. I didn't need to check, but habit had me turn toward the study window anyway. There it was, gleaming beneath the security lights, a white Tesla Model S, spotless despite the drizzle. Emily's car, or rather, Brandon's car, though I suspected she told herself otherwise. He was always the one behind the wheel, always the one setting the direction, while Emily followed in his shadow, clutching designer bags and practiced smiles. The migraine hadn't started yet, but I could feel it waiting for me, crouched in the shadows of my skull, ready to pounce. I set the bourbon down, smoothed my tie even though the hour was late, and walked through the marble foyer. The photos on the wall felt heavier tonight. Emily at 5, gap-toothed and grinning, with scraped knees from learning to ride her bike. Emily at 18, diploma in hand, proud and fierce. Emily at 28, in her wedding dress at the Four Seasons, her smile a mixture of nerves and excitement. I had believed in her then. Believed in the girl who held my hand at graduations, who cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who whispered, "Thank you," when I gave her the necklace she still wore now. But those pictures mocked me as I reached the door. Mocked my naivety. Mocked the father who had spent a lifetime giving without ever realizing the well could run dry. I opened the door, and there she was, Emily, my daughter. Her smile looked like it had been glued on at the last second, too stiff, too bright. She threw her arms around me, holding on just a moment too long. I knew that embrace, it was never about comfort. It was a deposit, emotional currency for a future withdrawal. Brandon stood behind her, barely glancing up from his phone. His thumb flicked the screen with the intensity of a man checking stock prices, sports scores, or worse, gambling odds. His presence filled the porch without a word, his tailored suit, his polished shoes, his air of entitlement. He didn't need to smile. He didn't need to ask. Brandon never asked. He expected. "Daddy," Emily said, her voice light, sweet, but tinged with tension. "We need to talk." Of course they did. They never visited just to talk. I stepped aside, and they walked in like they owned the place. Brandon didn't even pause. He brushed past me, his cologne clinging to the air like a perfume salesman had spilled a bottle of arrogance in my foyer. His shoes clicked against the marble as he headed straight to the living room, straight to my chair. My chair. I followed slowly, bourbon still clinging to the back of my throat, its warmth replaced by something sour. Emily clutched her bag, a $5,000 Christmas gift from me, as if it contained the answer to her nerves. She perched on the edge of the couch, fingers fiddling with her pearl necklace, the one I gave her for her 30th birthday. She always touched it before asking me for something. Always. "Can I get you anything? Water? Wine?" I offered. Though hospitality was the last thing I felt. "Let's cut to the chase, Rob," Brandon said without looking up from the documents he was spreading across my coffee table, his fingers tapping as if this was his office, his meeting. Rob, not Robert, not Mr. Mitchell. Rob, like I was just another man at the bar. I gripped my bourbon glass tighter. 10, 9, 8. I tried counting down like my therapist had taught me years ago. It didn't work then, and it wasn't working now. "Daddy," Emily's voice rose slightly, that practice pitch she used when she wanted me to believe in her. "You know we wouldn't come unless it was absolutely necessary. You've always said family comes first, and we're family." Her words stung. They weren't false, but they were weaponized. She had learned long ago how to wield sentiment like a blade. "What happened to the Round Rock property?" I asked, keeping my tone even, though my jaw had locked tight. Brandon finally looked up, smirk tugging at his lips, as if I had asked about the weather in some distant country. "Market corrections? Temporary setback? That's not why we're here." Of course it wasn't. Emily's fingers spun her wedding ring, my mother's ring, passed down through generations. She spun it the way she had when she lied at 12, denying she had broken Margaret's china set. Some tales never die. "The thing is," she began, then faltered. "Brandon's been working so hard on this new venture, a tech startup, revolutionary, very promising." I cut her off before she finished the performance. "How much?" The grandfather clock in the corner ticked, each second a drumbeat of inevitability. 1, 2, 3. Brandon leaned back in my chair, spreading into it like a man who had already claimed victory. The leather creaked under his weight, a sound I had always associated with my own solitude, my own rituals. It felt defiled. It's really not that much for someone with your assets, he said. 500,000. We need it in our account by noon tomorrow. The room tilted. My left eye throbbed. Not 50,000. Not even 100,000. $500,000, delivered as casually as someone ordering dinner. I started, but my voice caught. Memories crashed over me uninvited. Teaching Emily to ride her bike in Zilker Park, running beside her as she wobbled and finally found balance. Her graduation at UT, her smile as wide as Texas. Walking her down the aisle, thinking I was giving her away to a man who would protect her, cherish her, keep her safe. Had that girl ever existed, or had I imagined her? Daddy, we wouldn't ask if we had any other option, Emily whispered, dabbing her eyes, though I saw no tears. The mortgage, the kids' schools, you know how expensive everything has gotten. Yes, I knew, because I paid for those schools. $15,000 per child per semester at St. Andrews. I knew because I'd covered the down payment on their Westlake home. $200,000 that was supposed to be a one-time help. Brandon stood without permission, walked to my bar and poured himself 3 fingers of my Macallan 25. Not just any whiskey, my whiskey. A bottle I reserved for nights of reflection, nights of victory. He drank it like it was soda. These aren't bank people we're dealing with, Rob, he said, his tone suddenly cold, calculated. They're serious individuals. Would hate for this to affect your reputation at the country club or the dealerships. The threat hung in the air like his cologne. Heavy. Suffocating. Nauseating. My pulse quickened. The migraine exploded fully now, pain shooting across my skull. I gripped the mantel for support, breathing in shallow bursts. Emily touched my arm gently, her fingers soft, but I could feel the steel beneath them. Daddy, please. The girl in the photos on my wall, the one with the gap-toothed grin, the diploma, the white dress, I couldn't find her anymore. She was gone, replaced by this woman, this stranger who sat in my house demanding $500,000, and for the first time, I wondered not what I had done wrong, but what I was going to do next. The silence after Brandon's words was thick enough to choke on. These aren't bank people we're dealing with, Rob. They're serious individuals. The sentence clung to the air, each word deliberate, heavy, meant to lodge itself into my skull like a nail hammered into wood. Brandon swirled the Macallan in his glass, eyes fixed on me as if he were the one hosting this conversation, as if this were his home and I were the unwelcome guest. Emily's hand still rested on my arm, warm, trembling, though I couldn't tell if the tremor was genuine or part of the performance. She had always been good at playing her part. Too good. 500,000, I repeated, my voice more a whisper than a question. Brandon leaned back, crossing his legs comfortably in my chair. My chair. The image seared itself into me. A man with no roots, no history in this house, spreading his arrogance across the one place that had always been mine. Not even that much, when you think about it, Brandon said smoothly, as though we were discussing the weather. $500,000 is pocket change compared to the deals you've managed in your lifetime. You can wire it tonight and not even notice it's gone. His casual tone was more infuriating than if he'd shouted. I wanted to throw him out then and there. Wanted to remind him that every brick in this house had been earned, that every square inch of marble had been paid for with decades of sweat and sacrifice, but the migraine pinned me down, its claws digging into the back of my skull. Brandon, I said slowly, forcing my voice to remain level, why don't you start from the beginning? What exactly did you get into? He smirked. The kind of smirk that belonged to someone who believed he was the smartest man in the room. I told you, Rob. A tech startup. Revolutionary idea, disruptive. We're talking multi-billion-dollar potential once it scales. Emily perked up, nodding eagerly as if rehearsed. It's true, Daddy. Everyone's saying this could be the next big thing. Brandon's been working night and day. He's so close. Close to what? I snapped before I could stop myself. My patience, already thin, frayed further at the sound of her rehearsed lines. To securing the future, Brandon said, ignoring the sharpness in my tone. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his cologne saturating the air between us. But the problem is liquidity. Short-term liquidity. We hit a snag, unexpected costs, timing issues, nothing serious, just a matter of cash flow. Cash flow? I repeated. The word tasted foul. $500,000 is not cash flow, Brandon. That's a life savings. That's a retirement. Not for you, he said quickly. Too quickly. You've got more than enough. Why let it sit in some boring fund-earning scraps when it could fuel the next Apple, the next Amazon? I stared at him, barely recognizing the man who had once sworn to love my daughter, to protect her. Instead, here he was, circling like a vulture, picking through my life for scraps of flesh to feed his ambition. Emily shifted closer, her perfume familiar, comforting in another life but suffocating tonight. Daddy, please, it's not like we're asking forever. Just a loan. We'll pay it back. Brandon has investors lined up, big names. The return will be tenfold. The word loan rolled off her tongue like a lie dipped in sugar, a lie I'd tasted before. What about the Round Rock property? I asked again, sharper this time. Brandon waved it off with a dismissive flick of his wrist. That was different. Market downturn. Bad timing. But this is untouchable. It's the future. I clenched my jaw so tightly my teeth ached. The Round Rock property had cost me dearly, a can't-lose investment that evaporated within a year. I had swallowed that loss, telling myself it was for Emily's future, for her stability, and here they were again, sitting in my home, demanding more. Why me? I asked, though I already knew. Emily's eyes shimmered with that carefully measured sheen of moisture. Because we trust you, Daddy. Because you've always believed in me. The girl in the photos on the wall. The gap-toothed child. The proud graduate. The glowing bride. I searched for her in those eyes and found only shadows. My pulse throbbed in my temples. My breaths came shallow. Emily, I've already helped. The house, the schools, the tuition, the down payment. Her hand squeezed my arm tighter. This is different. This is survival. Survival. The word rattled through me. For whom? For what? Brandon's Tesla? Her pearls? Their Westlake mansion with its imported stone countertops and infinity pool? Was that survival? Brandon set his glass down with a deliberate clink. Let me make this simple, Rob. If the money isn't in by noon tomorrow, people will start asking questions. Questions you don't want attached to your name. Country club people talk. Dealership boards listen. It's amazing how quickly a reputation can sour. It was no longer a request. It was an ultimatum. A threat dressed in a tailored suit. Emily shifted uncomfortably at his words, but she didn't contradict him. That told me everything I needed to know. The migraine pulsed harder, exploding behind my left eye. I rubbed my temple, staring at the floor, trying to process the surreal reality of the moment. $500,000, $500,000 by noon tomorrow for serious individuals. I looked up at Brandon, at Emily, at the two people who had turned my home into a theater of betrayal. Let me think, I said finally, my voice low, steady, though inside I was unraveling. I need to think. Brandon leaned back, satisfied. Of course, just don't take too long. Noon tomorrow. We'll check in. He rose, adjusted his jacket, and walked toward the foyer as though he owned the house, as though I had already signed over the check. Emily lingered, her eyes searching mine, her smile faltering. Daddy, she whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The sound of their departure echoed through the house, the closing of the door, the retreat of footsteps, the quiet purr of the Tesla gliding away. I stood alone in the living room, the grandfather clock ticking like a countdown in the corner. The bourbon glass on the mantel trembled in my hand as the reality settled in. They had dragged me into something deeper than I'd ever imagined, and for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about survival mine, not theirs. The night after their visit was one of the longest of my life. Sleep teased me but never came. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face smiling, pleading, rehearsed, and Brandon's smirk, that smug curl of the lips that made me want to break something. $500,000. By noon, to men Brandon had called serious individuals. The words echoed over and over until they fused with the pounding in my skull. At 3 in the morning, I found myself back in my study. The bourbon glass was empty, the bottle half gone. Papers were scattered across the desk, none of them making sense anymore. Quarterly reports, dealership projections, investment statements, all numbers I had once controlled, now meaningless in the face of their demand. I thought of Margaret, my late wife, her voice whispering from memory. Asterisk. Don't spoil her too much, Robert. Don't give her everything. She has to learn to stand on her own. Asterisk. I hadn't listened. I had written checks, paid tuitions, bought houses, funded lifestyles. And now, here we were. My daughter wasn't asking, she was demanding. And her husband had crossed a line no man had ever dared to with me. By dawn, my decision was made. I didn't pack much. A small suitcase, essentials, my passport. The rest could rot in the house. Let them choke on the silence of marble floors and empty whiskey bottles. But before I left, I prepared one last thing. A box. It wasn't large, just big enough to make them curious, big enough to make them believe. Inside, I placed a single folded sheet of paper. No money, no accounts. Just 7 words, written in black ink with the steady hand of a man who had finally stopped being afraid. Asterisk, asterisk. Betrayal, revenge, justice. It begins. Asterisk, asterisk. I sealed the box, placed it just inside the front porch where they couldn't miss it, and locked the door behind me. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home felt final, like the last chapter of a book I had been too weak to close before. By noon, I was at the airport. The migraine had dulled, replaced by a strange calm, as if my body had finally understood what my mind already knew. I was done being their victim. I sat at the gate, bourbon headache fading, watching planes taxi across the tarmac. The house, the dealership, the country club, let them have their whispers. Let Brandon posture and Emily spin her ring. None of it mattered anymore, because for the first time, I was free. Meanwhile, back at the house, the stage was set. I imagine it clearly, though I wasn't there to see it. The gleaming Tesla pulling into the drive, Brandon's impatience barely contained as he strides toward the porch, Emily following with her nervous fingers clutching her pearls. They expect a transfer slip, a check, a sign that I had folded as always, that Daddy had come through. Instead, they find the locked door and the box. Brandon crouches first, frowning. He shakes it, expecting the heavy weight of cash, perhaps a ledger, something tangible. Instead, the box feels far too light. He rips it open, the cardboard tearing like skin, and inside just the paper. Emily leans over his shoulder, her breath catching as her eyes read the words aloud. Betrayal, revenge, justice. It begins. Her voice trembles, the words echoing in the quiet porch air. Brandon's face hardens, fury painting his features. He crumples the paper in his fist, but it doesn't erase the words. The truth is already written. Emily gasps, her hand flying to her mouth. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's guilt. Or maybe it's the first time she realizes her father, the man who had always opened his wallet, who had always fixed her problems, has walked away. I wasn't there to hear their screams, but I imagine them. High, sharp, desperate. A sound born not of physical pain, but of something deeper. The dawning awareness that the well had finally run dry. On the plane, I sipped a watered-down drink and closed my eyes. For years, I had carried their burdens, their demands, their endless needs. I had been father, banker, savior, but the note in that box wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration. Justice had a way of balancing the scales. And tonight, for the first time, I felt the balance shift. The hum of the airplane engines was steady, almost soothing. As the ground below shrank into a quilt of lights and shadow, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not happiness, not even peace, but control. For decades, I had been the man who solved everything. Tuition shortfalls, mortgage down payments, broken cars, unpaid debts. They came to me like pilgrims at a shrine, and I gave. Always gave. Always believing that one more check, one more loan, one more bailout would fix things. But what happens when the shrine runs dry? They found out this morning. I pictured it in vivid detail, as if I were still sitting in the marble foyer, Brandon's smug confidence crumbling when the box revealed only a single slip of paper. Emily's desperate gasp as the words burned into her mind. Asterisk. Betrayal. Revenge. Justice. It begins. Asterisk. They thought they owned me. They thought guilt, blood ties, and veiled threats could keep me tethered. They were wrong. By the time the plane landed, my phone was buzzing relentlessly. 15 missed calls, 9 messages, all from Emily. Her texts came in bursts of desperation. Asterisk. Daddy. Please? Answer. This isn't funny. Asterisk. Asterisk. Where are you? Brandon is furious. Asterisk. Asterisk. They're coming back tonight. What do I tell them? Asterisk. Asterisk. Daddy, please, we need help. Please, please, please. Asterisk. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I powered the phone off and slid it into the seat pocket, leaving her words trapped in the dark. That night, in a hotel room 2 states away, I finally let myself exhale. The air smelled of detergent and stale coffee, but it was clean, honest. No perfume, no expensive cologne, no lies. Just silence. I poured myself a modest drink, not Macallan, not aged to perfection, just something simple from the minibar. And for the first time in years, it tasted better than anything from my collection. Because it wasn't shared, it wasn't stolen, it wasn't desecrated, it was mine. Meanwhile, back home, the story was already beginning to unravel for them. Brandon's serious individuals didn't take kindly to excuses. They wanted their $500,000. And when Brandon couldn't deliver, when Emily couldn't bat her lashes and tug at pearls to conjure the money out of thin air, the cracks began to show. Neighbors noticed, country club whispers spread, the Tesla parked crooked in the driveway for days at a time, Brandon pacing the porch with a phone pressed to his ear, Emily crying behind closed blinds. I wasn't there to hear it, but I know the pattern of collapse well. First comes the shouting, then the scrambling, then the silence of 2 people who finally realize no one is coming to save them, especially not me. Some would call me cruel. A father abandoning his daughter, leaving her to sink under the weight of her own choices. But cruelty is giving someone endless rope and pretending it's not strangling them. Cruelty is letting her believe there would never be consequences. What I gave them wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. A week passed. Then 2. My lawyer called, his voice tight with concern. Brandon had tried to access one of my accounts, waiving forged permissions that collapsed under scrutiny. Emily had shown up at his office, tears streaking her face, begging him to tell her where I was. He didn't. I had given strict instructions. No transfers, no exceptions. By the 3rd week, word reached me through an old friend at the club. Brandon was gone. Disappeared in the middle of the night, the Tesla abandoned, accounts frozen. Some said he'd fled. Others whispered the serious individuals had finally collected their due. Emily was left behind, alone. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it steeled me. Because Emily wasn't a child anymore. She wasn't the gap-toothed girl in the photos, or the bright-eyed graduate, or even the nervous bride. She was a woman who had made her choices, who had chosen him, chosen the lifestyle, chosen to keep knocking on my door with rehearsed smiles and empty hands. She would survive. Or she wouldn't. But it would no longer be on my shoulders. One night, in the quiet of my rented apartment, I opened a fresh notebook. The first page was blank, waiting. I uncapped my pen and wrote the same words I had left in that box. Asterisk, asterisk, betrayal, revenge, justice, it begins. Asterisk, asterisk, not as a threat this time, as a record, a beginning, the story of a man who finally stopped giving, the story of a father who finally chose himself. And as I closed the notebook, a rare smile tugged at my lips, because for the first time in years, the beginning of the end didn't feel like loss. It felt like freedom.